Hi everyone, a bowl of lo mein noodles here with the rhyme signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of being the far superior accompaniment to any Chinese takeaway dish. And today we're going to be doing a review of the new Lo Moon album. I wish you way more than luck. I've prided myself as identifying within the musical space as someone who's really into the heavy stuff. The more likely it is to make your nan run away in fear that Satan himself is about to rise from beneath the floorboards, the more likely I'm going to enjoy it. And while I maintain that status, and I'm somewhat proud of it, truth to be told, that doesn't mean that there isn't a place in the infernal city of Dis that is my heart for the lighter, softer, more compassionate side of the musical spectrum. I of course have my love of classic progressive rock, my dear ABBA and Elton John, but also for the new wave of modern indie rock. You'll find me quite content with bands like The War on Drugs, Fleet Foxes, The Decemberists, The National, etc, etc. And now I find myself in the delighted position of welcoming the altogether rather lovely Lo Moon to the party. Coats and bags in the cupboard to the left, guys, and don't mind the incubus at the bar. He won't hurt you in any way that will leave a permanent mark. I've got nothing to prove. The band hails from the City of Angels itself and consists of frontman Matt Lowell on vocals and guitars, Chrysanta Baker on synth and bass, Sam Stewart on guitars, and Sterling Laws on drums. And they've been around for a relatively brief 8 years at this point, having been busy making a name for themselves around the local scene in their early years. Success on tours supporting the likes of Glass Animals, Ride, Phoenix and London Grammar gave them a much wider audience, and the world started paying attention to the rising stars that were Lo Moon. So now we come to their third LP, I Wish You Way More Than Luck, following up from 2022's A Modern Life and their 2018 self-titled debut. And this is my first exposure to the band, who came to my attention following a very positive-sounding post about their music from the Prog Mind, citing it as one of their most anticipated releases of the year. Now, given that the Prog Mind has steered me in the right direction more than once, I figured I'd take the plunge and dive deep into the soothing, intimate waters of what can easily be described as one of the more promising quasi-progressive indie rock bands out there right now. So, let's dive right into what I really love about this album. I've had a soft spot for this kind of music for a long while now, and there's something so immediately familiar about the sounds of this album that took me a minute or two to really place, and then it struck me. Matt Lowell's vocals are giving me serious Peter Gabriel vibes. Not necessarily in tonality or delivery, but in a more thematic and attitudinal sense of the word. It's as if you took Peter Gabriel, blended him with Steven Wilson and Bruce Sword, shook vigorously, and served over ice. His vocals are an immediate point for me to gravitate towards, and that sense of familiarity, coupled with the new, gave me a pretty solid anchoring point for which I could explore and enjoy the music surrounding him. And the music is quite excellent too. Chrysanta Baker's synth and bass work is especially enjoyable, managing to neatly avoid the potential pitfalls of being too overbearing and cheesy and fading into a nothingness in the background. The synth is tasteful, warming and friendly, the bass is slick and beautiful, adding a great deal of texture and intrigue to the lower end of the record. Sam Stewart's guitars and Sterling Laws' drums are no slouch either. Now, indie rock is seldom selected for being an example of pure technical virtuosity, preferring normally to focus on melodic excellence. But Lo Moon have managed to provide that melody, but also give us moments of genuinely excellent musicianship. Take my favourite track on the album, Evidence, which sounds honestly like a long-lost Porcupine Tree song at times. It explores these huge spaces, darting in and out of ideas left and right, but always manages to stay on the straight and narrow. This is not a progressive rock record in the typical sense of the word, instead falling very much into those sort of adjacent spaces, think Blackfield, The Pineapple Thief, RPWL, No Man, etc, etc. But unlike recent efforts from those bands, I have very little to complain about here. The music is etched with a kind of loss and longing, feeling like the eulogy of someone who's faced the worst parts of their life but come out the other side feeling sorrowful but grateful for enduring the brutal challenges that life often throws our way. It feels genuine, music written by emotions first and technicality second, which makes the expression of the human condition found within to be effortlessly enjoyable and deeply relatable. Now, it's not often that I'm faced with music that manages to cut this deeply, this profoundly, but I'm always extremely grateful when it does, and I'm certainly feeling similarly to this album as I did to the first two Blackfield albums. That is to say, very positively, but with a sense of nostalgic melancholy with how affecting the music has been to me emotionally. So, let's be real here for a second. There's not honestly a great deal I have to complain about on this album. It's lush and excellently produced with real heart behind the recordings, but there has to be a line that's drawn where I have to take some tiny little nitpicks with the album, whatever. In truth, I suppose you could argue that this album does kinda little to differentiate itself from the slew of similarly emotive indie rock that's already out there. I can't honestly say that for me personally there's not much on here that really helps me to identify this as an exclusively Low Moon record over, say, a War on Drugs one, outside of, obviously having a different lead vocalist. Now, this isn't a huge deal for me personally, as I'll honestly take good music regardless of any kind of sonic individualism for the sake of it. I'll take 100 bands that sound similar but put out good music over one band that goes out of their way to purposefully identify themselves on the outskirts of whatever their intended base is. But in some ways, I don't know, I would have preferred a few more unique flags or calling cards. Now, it's entirely possible this is just a me thing. I do, after all, have a fairly limited exposure to this kind of music, but there were several points where I felt, distinct callbacks of familiarity to other bands that I've explored within the niche, but honestly, it's not much of a bad thing, as the good parts of this album outweigh the bad to the point where any real criticisms are almost completely negligible.
Now we're standing on the edge of us.
So, what else can I say about Low Moon's I Wish You Way More Than Luck? I've been itching to stretch outside of my usual wheelhouse for a while now, and while I'll always fall back onto metal of the death, doom, black and sludge variety, sometimes you need an appropriate palate cleanser to remind you that music can be beautiful in more ways than you're normally used to. I Wish You Way More Than Luck has snapped my attention to it rather aggressively and has dominated my listening almost completely for the past few days. It is a delightful album that's easy to enjoy on a surface level and even more affecting once you pay attention to the lyrics and the nuance of the more complex compositions that sit in plain sight but can be easy to miss on a casual listen. This is a very easy physical purchase recommendation, guys. If you're in the mood for something a lot more indie-focused with some gorgeous melodies, incredible vocal performances, and just the right amount of heartache, it's a beautiful, slow-burn album that deserves your full attention for its 41-minute runtime. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, so if you loved or hated this one, please talk to me about your experiences with the album in the comments below. Please do drop me a thumbs up if you like this video, please do tell your friends about me, and please do drop me a subscription if you've been enjoying my content. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.